All right, folks, I have 9 o'clock. So for anyone that I haven't met, my name is Jennifer Jones. I'm the Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer for the Salem County Chamber of Commerce, and I would like to welcome you today and thank you for coming to hear about this very exciting project for our community. In the interest of time, I think we're going to go ahead and get started and just let folks jump on as they can. I want to give everybody just a heads up. Please mute yourselves unless you're speaking. There's a lot of background noise that can interfere with the presentations. So if you could mute yourself, and then we're going to ask you if you have questions to post them in the chat section, and then there'll be the folks from the NJEDA will read them off and answer them. We're kind of going to change the agenda up a little bit. The NJEDA thought it might be best to have a video just kind of as an overview to get started. Then we'll have some statements from our freeholders and our 3rd legislative district. And then we're going to go right into the Windport presentation with Tim Sullivan, the CEO of NJEDA, leading that off. So I've turned the host position over to Brian Sabina from NJEDA so that he can port everything up.
Great. We'll start with the video.
As the offshore wind industry is booming on the East Coast, the state of New Jersey is constructing the first purpose-built greenfield offshore wind port in the United States, an essential infrastructure investment that will generate thousands of high-quality green jobs and offer a platform to realize our clean energy future. Perfectly located at the center of the East Coast wind belt, New Jersey is committed to generate 7.5 gigawatts of offshore wind power by 2035, 30% of the U.S. offshore wind market. The New Jersey Windport is positioned just north of the Delaware Bay and Lower Alloways Creek. The port has open access to the Atlantic Ocean, over 200 acres of flexible land, no vertical restrictions, and a robust trades and technical workforce. Because it's within a day's steaming distance from more than half of U.S. offshore lease areas, the port can efficiently support co-located marshaling and large-scale manufacturing. The New Jersey Windport is being developed in 2 phases. Phase 1 includes a 30-acre marshaling area for component assembly and staging, and a 25-acre manufacturing site. Phase 1 construction begins in 2021 and will be completed by 2023, in time to support the first round of New Jersey and East Coast projects. The sites in Phase 2 become available between 2024 and 2026. It includes more than 150 acres of additional marshaling and manufacturing land. This phase will enable expanded investments from offshore wind blade, tower, nacelle manufacturers and their supply chain partners, accommodating up to 1,500 new jobs. New Jersey Windport, transforming our state, supporting our offshore wind industry, empowering us. Learn more about the port and discover how you can join the New Jersey offshore wind revolution at nj.gov/windport.
All right. I'm happy to turn it back.
Just like that, unshare your screen. All right, thanks, Brian, for queuing up that video. So now I'm going to ask our freeholder board if they would like to make a statement or two. I know there are several of you that are on.
Well, this is Charlie Hassler, and I don't know if I was on there, but there's Doc. We are the liaisons to the economic development, and I'd like to thank Brian for that call. Jen, thanks for organizing this, and John and Adam, thanks for being on there. You always support us down here with your legislation and things we have to do. We're looking forward to this project, of course, and anything that we can do to help support it, please let us know. That's all I can say. We're ready to go to work. We want it. We'll do it. Just let us know what we need to do to help you.
I would add to that, we're quite excited. As you know, there's a lot of work going on trying to interest people in the Port of Salem, and we're going to explore a little bit whether we can board off of this to help increase the traffic through there. That will certainly help the county. It's exciting job-wise. And Brian, we certainly want to keep in touch. If I disappear, by the way, I'm kind of in between things, so I'm not passing out or anything yet. So thanks for everything that you guys are doing.
I'd like to
Ben,
say, ditto
finger?
on everything. Who gave you the finger?
I think
I'd like to
Jennifer
say
did.
ditto on everything. Oh,
I
okay.
didn't mean to. I was switching so I could see you guys talking.
I'd like to say ditto on what the other freeholders said. And also, Ellen, it's coming in your area. There should be a big spinoff with all the people that's going to be needed, not only from Salem County, they're going to be an influx of people from out of the county. So excited. It can't happen soon enough.
Do we have any other freeholders that would like to say anything? Okay. John and Adam, would you like to say anything?
Yes, absolutely. Jen, thank you. And good morning, everybody. It's Adam Talafer. I think I don't say it lightly. I was speaking to the Woodstown Rotary when this press release came out. And I said, you know, since my time being in the legislature and representing this district over the last 5 years, probably the best news that I've heard and been a part of since I've been in this position. So I'm just, you know, on behalf of just myself, I'm truly excited. And I tell people, I've been in for 5 years, and John and Steve have been working on this thing far longer than I've been in the legislature. So I just want to take my hat off. I always say I'm one of the luckiest guys around getting the opportunity to work with John and Steve, not only from the state perspective, but our freeholders and our elected officials at the local level in the chamber. Thank you all, because parts on this, but this is a team effort. And the one thing that I will say about this is, you know, when you think about the jobs that are potentially coming to Salem County, it's fantastic. And you know, having the opportunity to continue to work with the VOTEC and the county college and training some of our residents in Salem County for these jobs that are coming is something that, you know, me personally, I know our district is really going to be focused on. So I don't want to be too long. I want to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Assemblyman Berzicelli, to talk more about it. But for all people that joined this call this morning, thank you and look forward to your partnership.
Adam, thank you. Good morning to everybody. Greetings from Senate President Sweeney. He is at a leadership meeting at the State House and could not be on this 9:30 call. But just a little history. Everyone can appreciate history, especially in Salem County where it is cherished. It was Steve who thought of this site, remembering when he worked down there as an iron worker building the nuclear plant, and remembering that there was a wharf and that the heavy nuclear plant turbines were brought in over that wharf, and had suggested that the state, being the EDA, the governor's office, take a look at the site to complement what's taking place upriver between the old DuPont Repauno site in Gibbstown and the port of Paulsboro. And this governor, I know, you know, the governor always has critics no matter who the governor is, but he has stepped up big time on the development of this wind industry, because we had passed this legislation, both the Senate and the Assembly, and then Governor Christie came to Paulsboro and signed the legislation. But then the focus of his administration went away from wind. But that was reborn when the Governor Murphy took office and said, we're going to do this. And in that process, this major step for this marshalling point as phase 1 is simply used. And I'm sorry, bad manners. Let me say good morning to the freeholders. Good morning to the mayor. Because this will be a true partnership across the board. And to the EDA, I'm grateful for Brian taking time to partner with the chamber to get this messaging out, because, you know, we suffer in the county with no newspaper. So this stuff happens in a vacuum unless we all start talking about it. But the governor has made a public commitment to borrow through the EDA, the Economic Development Authority. Brian will give you details, up to or in excess of $300 million. That's real money. You can build this with the investment the state's going to make. And, you know, the state is making an investment in port infrastructure because that's where we see the future is. And this facility is ideally suited. And I know our friends in Salem City, it was mentioned, had raised the concern, well, why wasn't the Port of Salem selected for this? And there are physical reasons. We need the contiguous ground, we needed the access, we needed the deep water draft, and hopefully, as good doctor said, maybe there's some spin-off, maybe there's some secondary things that can help underpin the Port of Salem, because we've all made a big investment in getting rail into that location, and that's going to be valuable too. So that being said, there is a full commitment to make New Jersey the center of this wind industry. The first contract is leased to Ørsted, and we're playing back and forth with them at the moment to make them live up to their obligations. Governor's office is in full support with the focus of New Jersey should be the epicenter. We should be the Silicon Valley of the East Coast for the wind industry. We have the resources, we have the access, and we have the state commitment to make this happen. So on we go, and we have to stay focused. And as Ben said, it can't happen fast enough. And we'll now turn it, whenever Brian's ready to pick it up, he'll give you an idea of schedule. I have to step away myself as well. I think Adam may have to. We're dealing with a temporary budget at state level for 3 months with a $5 billion series of cuts in the budget. So my friends, there's going to be a lot of pain coming in very short order, and it's not going to be easy. But there's a lot of focus there. But at the same point, we're running concurrent to do these sorts of things because we lost the glass plant. We watched DuPont go away in Carnegie Point. We watched Mannington Mills operations be reduced. So getting jobs into Salem County is the single most important thing that all of us are committed to collectively. And this has a chance to really be helpful. So thank you to everybody. Brian, you're going to pick it up, and you're going to bring a lot of good news. And remember, everything you say, people are listening to. And remind the governor, he said he's going to do this, and we expect him to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John and Adam. That was awesome. And thanks to our freeholders. I'm just going to ask everyone if you would please put yourselves on mute. There's some of us that we're not able, there's some of you that I'm not able to mute. So if you're calling in on a phone or you're looking at the phone, mute your phone, because the interference can be problematic for other people who are trying to watch. So much appreciate that. And since Mayor Ellen Pomper is here, Ellen, would you like to say anything?
I got to tell you, listening, I don't know what to expect. I'm going to be a sponge and pay attention and absorb everything you have to say at this point. Okay?
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for coming. I'm going to ask Tim Sullivan, who is the CEO of NJEDA. He's on a hard stop, so he wanted to say a few words as well. So Tim, take it away.
Thanks, Jennifer. Good morning to everyone, and great to be with you. Chairman Berzicelli, Assemblyman Taliaferro, great to be with you. Thanks for your comments. To the freeholders and to the mayor, great to meet you. I haven't had a chance to meet most of you, but I suspect we'll be seeing a lot of each other over the next coming years here as we work together to build this wonderful project. I also want to give a shout out to Senate President Sweeney. As Chairman Berzicelli mentioned, the leadership that the Senate President has shown, and the partnership that he and the governor and the governor's office have on this project, and both assemblymen as well, is extraordinary, and it's going to be vital to getting this done, because we will, I'm sure, have bumps on the road and hurdles we have to get over that we'll need the leadership of the Senate President and the Assembly delegation, and of course the governor. So on behalf of Governor Murphy, I just want to say thanks to everyone for taking the time to visit on this project, as was said so eloquently by both the members of the Assembly. This is a once in a generation game changer kind of project. You know, we've been saying I joined Governor Murphy's team when he became governor, was 2.5 years ago. We've been talking about the wind industry as this potential game changer for New Jersey. And sometimes we say things in government that are a little more exuberant than the facts would suggest. In this case, it's not an exaggeration. Salem County could be the epicenter of a brand new industry in the Northeast. There is, there's going to be a hub, not just at this port, but at the related, whether it's at other nearby ports, whether it's in Paulsboro, whether it's at Port of Salem, whether it's at other sites throughout Salem County and throughout South Jersey that could support supply chain providers to these manufacturers. This is the kind of asset and the kind of project that can genuinely make Salem County the epicenter of a booming and growing regional industry. And there's a lot between here and there. The work that's been done, going far back behind when Brian and I got involved a couple of years ago, going back, as Chairman Berzaccelli said, to many years ago when the state began its commitment to offshore wind. But it's really, I think, come into focus, and it's been a top priority for us and obviously for Governor Murphy and for our team. So we couldn't be more excited about this. The news we got to make last week. In normal times when there wasn't a pandemic or whatever, we would have been, obviously we would have been at the site of the power plant and doing a big celebration. Hopefully this will all pass and we'll be able to do the normal stuff we would be able to do and do this in person and do these kinds of meetings together, because this is incredibly important. We also know that this is, I live up in Mercer County, and I wouldn't profess to know the ins and outs of Salem County, obviously, as well as you all do. This is an important project, and the particulars of it, of how it gets executed, are going to matter a great deal to the future of the people who call Salem County home. And so we're committed to working with you to get this right, not just in its sort of conception and big ideas. I think we've done I think the big idea is great, but as we get down to the finer points of how it gets built and how the impacts get managed, you have my word that as long as I have anything to say about it, this is going to be a partnership and a conversation that we will, whether it's with local elected leadership, with at the town level, with Mayor and her team, whether it's with the Board of Freeholders, with the Chamber of Commerce, with the business community, with labor. We want to work incredibly. This is too good an opportunity to not be great partners all together and work on this together. So you have my word, we will be good partners and good listeners. We want to take a few minutes this morning, tell you a bit about the project, and hopefully take some time to answer some questions. And if you have any concerns or anxieties, hopefully begin to dispel them or begin to work on solutions to them. Because again, this is an extraordinary moment. Let's work on it together and make this real, because we've done a lot of work to get here. There's a lot of work left to do to actually put shovels in the ground and build this darn thing and get it rocking and rolling. But we're incredibly excited. This is a big deal for Salem County, for South Jersey, for New Jersey, and for the region. This is incredibly important. So thrilled to be working with you. Thrilled and honored to have the chance to visit with you for a few minutes. As the chairman mentioned, I do have I don't have to go do legislative things because that's above my pay grade, but I've got something I'll have to jump to in a moment. But I do want to hand it to Brian Sabina, who has been the lead on this project for us for the last couple of years and has done an extraordinary job marshaling a team of resources inside government and outside government to bring this forward. So thrilled to be working with everybody. Again, Chairman and Assemblyman, honored to be with you. And thrilled to be working with you on this as we go forward, because this is years in the making and many more years to go of actually getting it done here. So excited to be with you. Brian, I'll hand it over to you.
And Brian, I'm sorry, Brian, before you start, I'm sorry, Jennifer, for interrupting, but Tim, I didn't realize I didn't have you on my page. So I just wanted to formally say hello to you and good morning to you. Let everybody know that Tim's responsibility to EDA is huge, because remember, the EDA is essentially like it's a bank. They are a driver for economic development across the state and for infrastructure projects for the state. I want all of you to know that Tim is available, has always been available to myself, Adam, and Steve by a cell phone call. He's responsive, and as much as he has his hands full, because it was EDA processing the small business grants, small business loans under these extraordinary circumstances that we're dealing with. So Tim, thank you, and thank you for jumping on with the chamber. These are good people. You're going to enjoy working with them. And Brian, I'm going to step aside now. It's all yours. You're going to bring the good news, and somebody at some point has got to bring a $300 million check.
Thank you so much, Chairman.
Thanks, thanks, Chairman. Appreciate that. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Tim. And yeah, thank you. I will continue the thanks to Mayor Pomper, to the freeholders, to Assemblyman and to the Chairman. We certainly know that, as I told the Mayor and a few others, there was a lot of angst across a number of different states about who was going to make the first move to invest in infrastructure and to kind of really do something big in the offshore wind industry. And we were pretty guarded about where that was going to happen and how that was going to come out, really, because we did not want to give some other states an opportunity to jump us. And we really did want to make a global splash. And so we understand that has meant we're learning about it kind of in real time as we're making the movie, and we appreciate your patience and your understanding on that side. The purpose of today, as Jennifer said, is we've talked about how great this project is. We want to give everybody a chance to really get underneath the hood a little bit more, to understand a little bit more about how the state's thinking about offshore wind, right? Because this investment is really part of a much broader package of efforts that we're doing to deliver the offshore wind industry in New Jersey. And then go a little bit more into the details of the project itself. So, when will it get started? What will it look like? What are some of the different aspects of it? Happy to talk for a little bit, and then happy also just to answer questions to the best of our ability. And I'm sure I can guarantee there'll be questions that come up today that we won't know the answers to, but I think as you heard from him and others, a strong commitment to make sure that we work with you to figure out those answers. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen here. So as Tim mentioned, offshore wind, we as a state see offshore wind as a once-in-a-generation opportunity. We looked at all of the different commitments that are going to be taking place between New Jersey, New York, Maryland, Massachusetts, up and down Virginia, up and down the East Coast, and it's something around 20 gigawatts of electricity, and that translates, when you kind of translate that into a capital investment that energy companies are going to be making in federal waters off of our coast. It translates to around $100 billion over the next 15 years. To put that in perspective, that number was around $25 billion 2 years ago. So the pace at which this industry is accelerating, making commitments both at the state level as well as the private sector level is relatively astounding. As an economic development professional, rarely do I get a chance to work on the birth of a new industry. And for me and for our team at EDA, this happens to be one of those opportunities. And our goal has been, if we know that there's going to be $100 billion worth of investment on the federal waters off our coasts, how do we make sure that we're capturing at least our fair share of that in jobs in New Jersey, investment in New Jersey, if not more than our fair share? And that really has been our whole goal is, if there's going to be this wonderful new energy market that's going to deliver multiple benefits, it's going to deliver clean energy to fuel our economy as well as new investment in new jobs, how do we get more than our fair share? So we have a couple of, as I promised, some framing slides here. We are actively positioning New Jersey as an emerging hub for the U.S. offshore wind industry. What does that mean? I think you've heard from the chairman, assemblyman from the administration. There is incredibly strong political commitments to capturing this opportunity in the wind industry. That is not lost on folks who are making decisions about where to build factories and where to site their projects. We have, you'll hear us kind of talk about gigawatts and megawatts, and just as a unit of conversion, 1 gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts. And that's kind of the unit that we normally talk about projects in offshore wind projects in. New Jersey is committed to 7,500 megawatts over 6 projects over the next 15 years. And the reason that's important is, one, it means we have a steady heartbeat of projects that will be happening over the next 15 years that we've already committed to today. And that's encouraging companies such as the wind turbine, tower makers and blade manufacturers, as well as the companies who are installing these, to locate in New Jersey. We are by far and away the state that has the clearest commitment, along with New York, which has a 9,000 megawatt commitment. But between the two states, we make up around 80% of the U.S. offshore wind industry. So we are really the hub of projects in the U.S. offshore wind industry. And what we have done in terms of laying out a schedule creates kind of certainty. So when we talk about usage of a port, when we talk about usage of factories, by having that steady heartbeat, we're ensuring that we have a consistent usage, so we don't have spikes in job creation, we don't have spikes in investment. We can have a good, consistent, sustainable flow of jobs and investments. In addition to this, kind of this third bucket is, we are building a whole suite of tools to support the offshore wind industry. Tim mentioned that I lead a group called the Office of Economic Transformation. We lead all the strategic sector work. I have a small team of folks who are dedicated just to focusing on building the supply chain here in New Jersey. We have a number of workforce development initiatives that are getting launched. We have some initiatives around how do we take small businesses and help them get the credentials and the experience and knowledge necessary to sell into these projects. So we certainly have kind of all of the above approach. And then this last number or bullet here is we are making investments in port infrastructure, and we'll talk a lot more about that. But whether that's, of course, starts with Paulsboro more than 10 years ago, and the $200+ million that the state and the county has invested there. That will continue to be an incredibly important asset in our offshore wind ports network. We're investing in Lower Alloways Creek, and we'll continue to invest in other locations around the state in order to create the port network required to support this industry and create jobs. So kind of part one of our commitment to offshore wind is kind of broader set of set of supports to create an offshore wind hub, an emerging hub. The second is why New Jersey is really well positioned for offshore wind is really God-given. It's our natural position on the U.S. East Coast. We happen to be sitting right in the smack dab in the middle of what some folks call the Saudi Arabia of wind energy. We happen to have very consistent wind, about 15 to 30 miles off our shore. We also happen to have a very shallow continental shelf. So that allows us to install projects that are consistently utilized very easily. If you look at a map and you had to put a bullseye into where would be like the center of gravity of all of those different wind farms that are on the U.S. East Coast, that dot would be in New Jersey or right off our coast. In addition, as I did mention, this is a bit of a regional economy. So as we talk with companies who are installing projects and building projects, many of them will have a project in Massachusetts, maybe a project in Connecticut, a project in New York, New Jersey, down to Virginia. Our location in the center of that region, our ability to connect both north and south, via the train corridor, via road infrastructure, as well as our ability to connect very easily, especially through places like Philadelphia International, to Europe, has been an incredibly powerful factor in terms of growing the industry. So many of you may know the offshore wind industry is about 10 to 15 years ahead in Europe. And bringing that expertise over to the U.S. and the fact that it can get to the U.S. East Coast fairly easily has been a major support to helping grow the industry in New Jersey. The last part that I think we always talk about, and we'll get to the product in a second, but I would fail as my job as an economic development professional if we weren't talking about the talent that we have here for the offshore wind industry. New Jersey's, in addition to our geographic location, our talent base is really our most enduring source of value to grow the economy. And Salem County, as we know, is right in the middle of that. As a state, New Jersey is incredibly strong in terms of the upper end of the education sphere. So fourth highest share of bachelor's degree holders and higher degree holders in the U.S. That means that, if we think about the offshore wind industry, it's installation, it's manufacturing, but there's also a good degree of project engineering and design engineering and finance and legal. New Jersey, kind of across, when we talk about these first two bullets on the slide, really has both of those. We have kind of that professional set of skills and workforce that is really powerful for especially at the beginning part of projects. And then we've done some analysis on our workforce in terms of the ability to deliver on manufacturing installation. We've run 90,000 individuals with technical trades backgrounds who have what we call wind adjacent skills. We know that wind turbine technician is the second fastest growing job in the US right now, just behind solar panel technician. So there are a lot of different states are thinking deeply about how do we make sure as some industries sunset, as kind of new industries are being born, that we're training folks with the right set of skills to take advantage of those opportunities. We happen to have we're starting from not a standstill, we're starting from a great place in terms of those skills. One of the other things you may have heard about, another investment that we talked about and we launched a few months prior to talking about the Windport, is the Wind Institute, which is really a new concept where we know workforce is really important. So Governor Murphy and the legislature are committing funds to create kind of a new industry-specific, I would say agency, but unit to to really focus on, one, how do we make sure that we are a centralized hub for workforce and making sure our people are prepared for the opportunities. Then two, how do we get the R&D side of this industry here in New Jersey? So you can imagine that when we start talking about $100 billion worth of capital investment, there's going to be R&D because people are going to want to see costs come down. We need to make sure we're making investments today in New Jersey to make sure we're capturing that activity. And there's no reason Salem County and Gloucester County and kind of this corridor from Paulsboro down through the Delaware Bay shouldn't be a center for R&D in addition to manufacturing and assembly. So that's really, if you take a step back, part of our bigger approach to positioning New Jersey for the offshore wind industry. But the reason we're here today is to talk about the investment in Lower Elements Creek. What we're talking about, and this is a picture that encompasses about half of the site. It is, as the chairman said, between a $300 and $400 million investment to create the first purpose-built offshore wind port. There are a couple of other states that have built kind of parts of ports that can help start to serve the offshore wind industry. But this will be really the first dedicated port facility that is designed for the offshore wind industry. If you look at Europe, there's probably 8 of these, maybe 6 to 8 of these sorts of ports in Europe that have been built over the last 15 years. We're proud to say this is the first one that will be in the U.S. It is, by all accounts, a generational investment in Salem County. So we've looked at the numbers, and you all probably know better than we do, but to our understanding, it's the largest kind of capital investment project in Salem County since the power plant. So we are pretty excited that it has the opportunity to help reshape the narrative, and as Tim and the chairman said, really position Salem County as a hub for the offshore wind industry. You may have heard us talk a lot about the fact that there are kind of 2 different aspects of the port. You'll hear us talk about marshaling and manufacturing. And marshaling, to just decode the industry jargon a little bit, means bringing in components via water. These are massive components. You'll see this kind of down here. You'll see 2 vessels. The bottom vessel is the delivery vessel. You'll see there's a crane on this vessel. Right next to this vessel has just delivered this kind of large white box called a nacelle. That nacelle is the wind, is kind of the jet engine, if you will, or the power generating unit on top of the wind tower. That will come in, kind of get staged. You'll see that there's kind of rows of them here. They'll kind of get stacked up, and they'll wait for the project to be installed. While they're stacked up, they'll have additional components added to them. So when we talk about assembly jobs, there's quite a bit of kind of final finishing that will happen in a marshaling port. One of the major things that will happen is you will see, I don't know if everybody can see my cursor, but you'll see that there are some really tall towers. Those are fully assembled, and you'll see that there are some tower pieces that have come in, again, via these delivery ships. These tower pieces are both laid down sideways as well as kind of assembled vertically here. They will be assembled and you go through all the final manufacturing at this marshaling course. So think about things like stacking the tubular pieces together, welding them together on the quay side, adding electrical components, adding secondary steel like ladders and such platforms. There's internal elevator shafts kind of within those towers. So there's some great work to be had there. So all of that happens kind of at the marshaling port, the last step of marshaling. So marshaling is assembly. We take in the parts, we kind of finish them, we assemble them, and then we load them on into an installation vessel. And this red boat right here is called the jackup vessel. It's literally the same sort of boat that's used to install offshore gas and oil wells and terminals. The boat, literally, you'll see it has a number of towers. Those towers get jacked kind of down, pushed into the seabed, and lifts up the boat to create a stable platform to install these offshore wind turbine components. What will happen is this red boat will it will get probably 4 to 6 of these towers loaded onto it. It will get a number of blades. You'll kind of see some blades laying down in the marshalling area, as well as these nacelles. All the different components will be loaded onto the installation vessel. That installation vessel will go out to the ocean and install. One of the reasons that Lower Alloys Creek is such an incredible location for this port is that the cost of this installation vessel is around $250,000 a day. So there's probably 6 or 7 of them in the world right now. We're building a new one here in the U.S. to support the first round of projects, but it's incredibly costly to utilize that boat. It's an incredibly large, specialized piece of machinery. So that is why staging this and kind of all the assembly is done right here at the port. The other reason that we'll talk about, it's pretty important, is you can see that these slender white towers are quite tall. So they're just a little bit taller than the cooling tower on the nuclear plant that's at the site today, which is not in this frame, but just to the south of this picture. They have to go up vertically, and therefore that means that they can't go underneath any power lines, they can't go underneath any bridges. So the location that has no vertical restrictions is quite important. As we looked at, and I'll kind of talk a little bit more about this, as we looked at this, where we could build this sort of asset in New Jersey, we looked at more than 40 locations across New Jersey, and it's one of only 2 that we found technically to be viable. A little bit more about the economic impact. So we talked about a $300 to $400 million green infrastructure investment. This, at the end of the day, will create around 1,500 jobs. We'll talk a little bit more about the manufacturing side of that in a second. Those 1,500 jobs are the manufacturing side plus those marshalling operations that I just mentioned. In addition, it's hundreds of construction jobs to build this port, and we'll talk about the construction schedule in a second as well. It's a phased approach. But net, kind of when this is all said and done, kind of at full steam, we model the project at creating around $500 million worth of economic activity, which is obviously a great opportunity for Salem County. It's a great opportunity for Lower Alloys Creek and Salem City, for South Jersey and the state. I saw an ABC News report out of Philly that did some person on the street interviews in the pizza shop in Salem City. The owner was pretty excited about the opportunity to see this sort of economic activity happening. I know we mentioned Salem County, Salem Port. We certainly see that there's an opportunity. Chairman Bertuccelli said some of this activity could not be done there because of the deep water access and some of the height restrictions. But there's a lot of opportunities to locate additional scopes of work and utilize that port facility as well in conjunction with the new Windport. We've talked, I mentioned this a little bit, but we see Lower Alloys Creek does not replace investments that are happening across the states for offshore winds. Paulsboro is at the top of that list. Paulsboro is behind some bridges, which means that it's best suited to some manufacturing scopes of work that can be shipped horizontally or laying down instead of vertically upright. So Paulsboro will continue to be a critical part of our offshore wind supply chain network. And you can imagine there are a couple other locations up the Delaware River that have the potential for offshore wind as well. Of course, Cape May, Atlantic County, probably put Point Pleasant on here as well, will serve as phenomenal O&M bases, operations and maintenance bases for the industry. And then if you start to kind of look further north, whether it's South Amboy or Newark, New York Harbor, there's going to be locations to do additional manufacturing kind of in the northern part of our state as well. So really, we do see this as Lower Alloys Creek and the Windport project as a key piece that serves a unique need within our network of offshore wind ports. We talked a little bit about this already. As I mentioned, the port is below both the Delaware Memorial Bridge as well as the Commodore Barry Bridge. It has ample space, so the site has around 200 acres of space. That's rare to find that space that is developable on the U.S. East Coast. In addition to looking across New Jersey, we looked across the whole U.S. East Coast and found about 5 sites across the whole U.S. East Coast that meet the technical requirements for this industry and this type of use. We talked about the trades workforce, incredibly important part of this. And I mentioned a little bit, but we are at this epicenter of the Saudi Arabia of offshore wind. That means that that boat that costs $250,000 a day to use doesn't have to travel too far to get to the sites. They call that kind of the steaming distance to the site. And the fact that we're within 50% are within days steaming distance is a huge cost advantage for New Jersey and for Lower Wallabies Creek to win the business moving forward. A little bit about the development, and then I'll shut up and start to take questions. So the development is scheduled over 2 phases. The first phase is, as I said, marshaling and manufacturing. You kind of see the L that we showed earlier. In addition, this is that kind of corner, that's the marshaling site. In addition to that, for phase 1, we're working with PSE&G to bring another 25-acre plot of land to support manufacturing. Manufacturing really will be the key driver of jobs over the long term. So marshaling will have 100 to 200 jobs. Those they can be seasonal, right? So there's probably a 9-month season for operations on a marshaling port. In the heart of winter, operations do have to stop there. Some deliveries in and out, but it tones down due to the weather. Manufacturing is 12 months a year, 24/7 type of operations. As we start to look at what that means, just to kind of give, I love this picture, it gives a little bit of a sense of the scale of the components. This is one of those nacelles, basically the kind of the jet engine type of component that's on top of the towers. Just to give everybody a sense of how large it is, person in the bottom right of this picture. So these are massive components. This component weighs a little over 800 tons, which is pretty heavy load. So part of the reason we selected this site is the ability to build a quayside that can withstand those loads. The other aspect, kind of a little bit more of a shot of that marshaling vessel. And here, kind of behind the marshaling vessel, you can kind of see the tower pieces kind of as they come in, stacked vertically, and then kind of the fully built up towers in the background as well behind the jackup vessel. This phase, as I said, starts construction as early as 2021, so we're targeting second quarter 2021. We're moving pretty aggressively to make that happen. It would come online mid-2023. So you can imagine there's a set of construction jobs that are happening, last 3 quarters of 2023, or last 3 quarters of 2021 through 2022, beginning of 2023, and then we'll start to see operational jobs in 2023, kind of Q2 to get ready, and really Q3 to really kick off some of those projects. Phase 2 it is expanding on that. So this is what really makes the project economically viable, is the ability to add this additional land to the site. It's an additional around 150 acres or so. It is really slated for some flexible marshaling / manufacturing space, and then some kind of core manufacturing space. So you can imagine that flexible space is kind of right here, just north of the current marshaling facility, which we could have some flexible, maybe a second marshaling slot, maybe additional laydown space. And then you'll see some additional factories locations that we have here across the site. Really, I really don't want to underplay the importance of the factories. Right? This is the equivalent, a nacelle factory is the equivalent of the GE jet engine manufacturing facility, or a blade facility. It's kind of the equivalent of a Ford or Toyota car manufacturing facility. These are kind of high quality jobs, 24/7 operations, sort of thing. Of course, that comes with complications, and that means that there are people and traffic and such, and that's certainly some of the challenges that we're looking forward to working with the air pumper and the freeholders and full set of stakeholders to work through. Kind of just another shot of kind of ports. A little bit about kind of our commitments. So EDA is currently acting as a developer of the project. we're fully committed to using 100% union labor on the construction of the project. We've already committed to that as part of our partnership with PSE&G, who is the landowner. I should have mentioned this earlier. You all probably know this, but this site is, basically wraps around the Hope Creek Nuclear Generation Station that's already on artificial islands in Lower Always Creek. In addition to using union labor, we're committed to creating a new standard for minority and women-owned business inclusion as well as workforce inclusion. We're already underway, getting ready to launch a study to allow us to help create some clear goals for minority women-owned business inclusion in the construction contracts. We have a lot of work through the Wind Institute on how do we start to think about creating a diverse and inclusive workforce for the offshore wind industry. So that is a big factor for us, and that's not just due to what's happening today. It's an overarching value of how we think about developments right now under Tim's leadership and John Rice's leadership at EDA. Of course, there's been a lot of discussion around building for sustainability, and New Jersey has put out a new set of regulations called NJEDA that will be in full compliance with. You imagine that when you're next to a nuclear power plant, you want to be as resilient as possible. So we are committed to doing that, as well as kind of developing in an environmentally responsible way. So if you look at the site, it's not a gigantic concrete pad. It is a dense packed kind of gravel surface. It's kind of permeable. All the smart things around development that you would do building this project from the get-go. The last thing I'll say is you may start to read up more about these sorts of ports, and you'll see that some of the ports in our places like Connecticut are being targeted to be used by just one developer, and we think that's the wrong way to go. We want there to be competition when it comes to these ports. We want there to be a variety of users who could potentially use this asset. That keeps the energy prices lower for the actual projects. It also keeps a steady heartbeat of jobs happening at the site if we can ensure utilization for years to come. So we're committed to competition. I think that's it. If folks are interested in more, I'm happy to answer questions now as much as I can. And then you can also go to nj.gov/Windport. You kind of get some more pictures of the site, kind of read a little bit more about it. But I'll pause there because I know I've been doing a lot of talking, and happy to answer questions.
Yeah, and folks, just as a reminder, if you could post your questions in the public chat, Brian and Patience Purdy from NJEDA are going to be pulling them from there. So I know a couple of questions came in to me privately during. If you could just post them in the public chat. I'm going to mute myself now.
So it looks like the first is, can we get a link to the webinar to show other people? And yes, once this webinar is over, it will be edited, and Jennifer will either be posting on the chamber website or sending out to all of the folks that were here, and you can certainly share that with friends, neighbors, and fellow colleagues. Brian, the next question there is there a promise to hire Salem County residents first?
Yeah, so of course, in addition to smart economic development includes hiring locally, right? It makes a lot of sense in terms of reducing transportation. It makes a lot of sense in terms of aligning engagement between local communities and the products themselves. We're fully committed to that. There's different phases of the project, and EDA is in charge of some aspects like construction and some of the operations of the port. There are other aspects which will be private sector jobs that are run by a company that's building these components. We're committed to setting a standard of engaging local engagement and creating opportunities at the local level, and two, setting an expectation for the folks who are going to be renting from us and who are our tenants, that they need to be engaging locally. If we just have a bunch of folks driving over from Delaware or Pennsylvania, we've lost the thread, right? So the goal is to create a local economic development engine for the Lower Eloise Creek, for the township, for Salem County.
Next question from Louis Joyce. What is the status of the offshore wind industry's commitment to this project?
Yeah, so we've been engaged with the offshore wind industry across the last couple of years. We certainly didn't want to build a big infrastructure asset that wouldn't be fit for purpose. So we've been in contact. There's a handful of, we'll call it developers. Those are the companies who actually build the offshore wind farms, as well as OEMs. So those are the folks who build the blades, the nacelles, the towers. We've been in pretty constant contact with them over the last 2 years, and they've been part of our design process so that we build the asset the right way. We're also currently in conversations with a number of them confidentially about actually taking space at the asset itself. So I think that's kind of the first part in our engagement. They've been overwhelmingly positive and supportive. I think if you can, I don't know if it's up on our website yet, but we have quotes in the industry is largely thrilled that this is happening. This is a major step for them. In terms of the industry broadly, right? I think one of our goals was how do we make sure we position New Jersey and Salem County as a hub for offshore wind. We've started, right? Part of that is communicating and talking about it. And I can tell you that I've gotten emails from companies in Brazil that we had no idea about who were saying, look, we want to get into the U.S. offshore wind industry. Tell us more about how can we find area in Salem Creek in Salem County to be near this plant. Our designer and engineer has said, 40, 50 emails of folks kind of, now that the cat was out of the bag last Tuesday, folks have realized kind of what they're working on, and folks from Germany to Taiwan to Japan to Korea to Denmark know about this project and know about Lower Alois Creek now. We're excited about it.
So the next question is, what kind of approvals are required from DEP with regards to riparian issues? And I guess on a state and federal level is the question.
Yeah, so there's as you can imagine, a project of this scope and size, there's permitting efforts at the local level, there's permitting efforts at the state level, there's permitting efforts at the federal level. We're in the process of filing and working with PSC&G to file federal and state permits. Some have gone in, some are about to go in to be filed. We've been working on that for quite a while to prepare those packages. There's a set of kind of local permits that kind of happen after that, right? So we kind of first make sure that, and we're fairly confident that everything is sorted kind of at the federal and state level, and then kind of we work our way down to make sure that any changes that we have at that kind of macro level get filtered down, and we're bringing to the county and the town and the right project. We're going through that process. In terms of riparian rights, there are New Jersey tidelands rights, and we're in conversations with the DEP to make sure we have the right access to that to support the project. I will say the environmental community is already vocally behind this project. We've done quite a bit of environmental assessments on that site. You can imagine EG had already done a lot of that because of the nuclear facility that's there. We feel there, our understanding is there's minimal impacts to both on the land side as well as on the sea side. So, none, if not very minimal impacts to shellfish is a big one that we were concerned about and spent a lot of time and efforts pushing through there.
And what sets this project apart from other similar projects that didn't work? Tim, when he was in his briefing with the governor, said this is a bit of a unicorn site. To be able to have the ability to have 200 plus acres with deepwater access, with no vertical restrictions, with the ability to do the sort of scopes and build a quayside that heavy just doesn't exist on the U.S. East Coast right now. Those factors, when we put it together, are what make this site so unique in terms of where we can build. There is one other site in the north. It's a little bit more constrained land-wise, and it's a little bit more congested in terms of traffic. So this ended up being the right solution for the state. But it's not like there were a whole bunch of other places that we could have done this. We looked and looked and looked for across the state, across the U.S. East Coast, and really this is a gem. So I'm going to combine a comment and a question here that came in a little differently but are related about how it's important that the education needs of the project are being met. And then a question that followed that asking if the community college will have opportunities to engage in workforce development programs.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree that education as well as workforce development, which of course we consider the community colleges to be part of that, is going to be a critical component. There are a couple of different avenues to do that. One is through the Wind Institute. We see the Wind Institute that is being stood up now. The governor announced it a few months ago as the central clearinghouse to connect, offshore wind players who want to build towers and nacelles with the local resources and the local talent pipelines that we have available today. Of course, that includes the community colleges. You're going to see some stuff, and I don't want to preview too much, but coming out from the Wind Institute around looking for solutions to wind turbine technician training. We're gonna see it around welding is going to be a skill that's going to be incredibly important. You can imagine both in some of the plans that are being talked about in the Paulsboro, Gloucester County area, as well as down in Salem County. That's going to be an incredibly important skill set that we're going to be leaning on the county colleges to help us with. So I think that I'm a long-winded way of saying it's going to be incredibly important to be working with those educational partners. I know that a lot of the county colleges have engaged already through the Wind Institute through a couple of sessions. If the folks on this call have not been yet, happy to kind of swing back and engage again. In terms of education, starting next year, and we'll see what happens with COVID, the state is starting to roll out the first offshore wind education that will start in the earlier grades, as early as elementary school and middle school. The reason is because we know that the goal for workforce education is not a four-year degree. It's a family-sustaining career. And because of that, we want to think about all sorts of different pathways to get into the offshore wind industry, some of which may include a four-year degree, many of which will include a two-year degree, and many of which will include an apprenticeship or a certificate or industry credential, right? So we want to make sure that we are making sure that parents as well as students understand that from the get-go early on. They understand the opportunities, and then they understand how they can kind of go get real-world experience, earn while they learn, and then if it makes sense for them, continue to step up through from additional educational opportunities.
All right, we've got a couple of questions left, and I'm going to cut it at the ones that are already on there, just in the essence of time. So I think a quick question, Brian, is how many towers are in the plan for this location?
Yeah. So to be clear, those towers are not installed at this location. Those towers come in as pieces or are manufactured as pieces, would be built in kind of sets of, we'll call it 6 to 12, then loaded onto that installation vessel and brought out and installed on the offshore wind farm. So it's not like there are towers that are just sitting there at 500, 450 feet, 500 feet all year round. In fact, it's best that they are built and kind of manufactured and kind of done kind of just in time for that installation vessel, because they don't want those kind of standing there kind of as toothpicks in the air for longer than they have to. So you can imagine at any given time, you could probably see 6, 8, 12 towers during the installation season. I would say that is generally from around April through October.
And then when do you start selling this? The manufacturing seems important. Is that harder to get than assembly?
Yeah, so we are in conversations now in terms of selling. That translates to leasing space, right? And leasing both the marshaling space as well as the manufacturing space. We're in conversations with companies. There's a handful of companies who are well suited to this site. We're already in conversations with all of those companies. I won't talk too much about the formal procurement process we'll go through to allocate the space, but I can assure you there's at least 3 companies who are in active conversations with us right now about utilizing the marshaling space, and at least another 2 companies who are already in conversations on the manufacturing side. A couple of others who are circling, but we haven't quite got as formally engaged with.
And then I'm going to combine our final two questions just so that you can answer them and wrap them up as we're getting close to time. So are there any local infrastructure needs beyond the port for this project? And has the issue of rising ocean waters created any design specifics for the construction of the site?
Yeah, I'll answer those in kind of alternate order. So in terms of ocean level rise, I mentioned the NJ Pact regulations. Those are all about taking into account sea level rise from the get-go when it comes to capital planning. And doing that it's just smart asset management, really. So we will build the site to be able to certainly meet those regulations, which are kind of take into account sea level rise that we know of today and that we can project today. In terms of additional infrastructure, we've started conversations with our Department of Transportation as well as our Department of Community Affairs. When we talk about new manufacturing jobs and we talk about new assembly and operations jobs, that comes with, it comes with some traffic. I would say that most of the heavy stuff, the components come in over water. Like it is, everything we're talking about in terms of the offshore industry components, almost everything is too heavy to come in via road. So you'll see barges come in via water and then kind of exit, assemble components. Certainly people, and there's going to be some other, deliveries similar to what you'd see at the power plant. There'll be aspects like that. Of course, will be over some local road infrastructure. We'll work with the Department of Transportation as well as the county and the town to make sure that we're doing that the right way and that the right investments are being made to support the right infrastructure. And housing, I think, and investments in the community are also pretty important when it comes to this. I said we have a commitment to hiring locally and to making sure the economic development impact stays local. Making sure that we have a vibrant community is a big part of that. And as I said to the mayor, and as I said to the mayor of Salem City, as well as I'll say to everybody, we see that as a partnership, and we look forward to working with you all to make that happen over the coming years.
We had one more sneak in, and then I'm going to ask everyone I know Brian's got somewhere that he needs to be after this. I've heard that another Windport is planned for Baltimore. Is that true?
Yeah, so there are a number of different Windports that are being discussed across the U.S. East Coast. If you look at a map, to do this sort of, the port in Baltimore, trade port Atlantic, is a little bit more akin to Paulsboro than it is to Lower Alloways Creek. So it is behind a number of bridges. It does have some heavy lift infrastructure, but you could imagine some manufacturing there. One of the benefits, or one of the downsides of that site, I don't want to get in their business, but is that the components are so large they can't go through the canal over to Cape May, right? So they have to go all the way down out the Chesapeake Bay around Maryland and Delaware there. And at $250,000 a day, that extra 2 days of steaming distance on either side makes that site less economical for the type of work that we're talking about. Thank you. Jennifer, really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about the project. I know it was a very exciting last week, but we didn't have a ton of details that we were showing. We want to be as transparent as we possibly can to do this the right way. And if there's nothing else, please do take away that from the top of the administration throughout EDA to the legislature to kind of our local officials, we see this as a team effort to get this done, and it is a real transformational project for the state. So we're incredibly excited.
And Brian, we are incredibly excited too. I know I tend to be emotional because I love this community so much, but when this was announced, I sat in front of my computer and just like tears rolled down my face because we need this project so badly right here. You know, not just for the jobs, but for what all of the outlying is going to do for our community and our economy. This is such a great thing. And, you know, there's a number of us on this call that work on economic development, and there are different subcommittees for this. So this is huge for us. I know that Jack Swain and Dr. Gorman have already been talking on the educational piece of that, on how they can pull together programs that are going to be helpful to this industry. So again, everyone, thank you very much for coming. Glad we were able to pull this together so quickly. Brian and your team, you guys did a great job of pulling the